Here are the machine that connects all the other machines and redeems them from their submission to the imperialism of the end, whether it be the imperialism of artistic manipulation or that of the engineers of the new life. Cinema appears this as the achievement of a communism, of the universal exchange of movements and intensities, escaping the dilemma of waiting for the objective conditions or anticipating them by revolutionary violence. This is this utopia of cinematographic communism that Deleuze revived in the lyrical pages that he devoted to Vertigo in the image movement. However, he had to simplify the case. In fact, man with a movie camera, as we could see in those two short extracts, can be seen in two opposite ways. It can be seen as an illustration of the technological voluntarism, subjective everything to the power of a central eye, or it can be seen as the dismissal of optical imperialism in favor of the free communication of movements. As a matter of fact, cinema proved able to unify the contraries. The voluntarist orientation of all movements under the command of a central eye and the dismissal of will, allowing for the free unfolding of vital energies. In such a way, cinema turned out to be much more than an art fitting the communist project. It turned out to be the utopia of a new world, the utopia of a world that would be spontaneously communist. This utopia leads me back to Hitchcock. More precisely, to the part that Godard gives him in the histories of cinema. The first image of Godard's history of cinema, if you remember, is borrowed from Hitchcock. It is in Rear Window, the gaze of the reporter, James Stewart again, lurking like a hunter behind the giant eye of his camera. Later on, in the section entitled The Conquest of Universe in the histories of cinema, Hitchcock embodies for Godard the power of capturing eyes and minds proper to cinema. But Godard does it, by virtue of a strange operation. Godard cuts and weaves the shots representing the burn, the fake suicide, the walk in the forest of sequoias, or the passionate kiss, into an entirely different filmic continuum, constructed by extracting from the narrative continuum of Hitchcock's film a number of objects: the rails of a train, the flight of an aeroplane, the winds of a mill, a woman brandishing a hairbrush or holding tight a bag, a bottle which falls down, etc. We can say that Godard treats Hitchcock's images as if they were Vertigo's images. But those images are no more what Vertigo's images were, the atoms of a dance embracing all the energies of the new world. Instead, they are dream images, sliding onto one another, merging or coming apart within the continuum of digital metamorphosis. Vertigo wanted to dismiss both the fascination for the story and the fascination for the image. Instead, Godard endows Hitchcock's stories to compose new sorts of fascinating images, and he endeavors to make with those fascinating images the history of cinema and the history of the century of cinema. Two formulas of Godard epitomize that history. The first one is about the Hollywood dream factory. Communism, Godard says, exhausted itself dreaming such factories. The second one is a diagnosis about what cinema became under the command of narration. Cinema substitutes for our look a word attuned to our desires. By so doing, Godard ties together two themes. The first one asserts a shift in utopia. The Hollywood dream factory would be the last form, the downgraded form of the utopia of the new mechanical world. The second one accuses cinema of having betrayed its mission. It should have been a machine of vision and intelligibility, connecting images to frame the sense of a common world, but in fact, turned into a machine of mirages, serving narratives of power, whether it be the scenarios of Hollywood's industries or those of dictators setting out to reshape their people. Therefore, the histories of cinema turn out to serve a purpose of redemption. Godard's fragmentation is said to release the potential of images from the stories to which they were submitted. By inventing unknown relations between films, photographs, paintings, newsreels, musical scores, etc., it allows cinema to play, at least in retrospect, the role of revelation and connection that it had betrayed. I will make two comments, on Godard's thesis and on the way he illustrates it in the histories. First, it certainly makes sense to affirm that the means of fascination used by Hollywood's filmmakers are the remainders of a lost cinematographic utopia. The filmmakers who came from Europe to Hollywood, after having been trained in Europe in the times of Futurism and Expressionism, turned the technical inventions and the machines of communication of the likes of Vertov into fictional means of machination and fascination. Such are, for instance, the camera in Lang's Beyond Reasonable Doubt, the telephone in Lang's Blue Gardenia, or Hitchcock's Dial-M for Murder, the train in Hitchcock's Stranger on a Train, or the plane in Hitchcock's North by Northwest. In Vertigo, the car plays this part. Scotty seems to be driven rather than he drives, led by his eye, an eye that is already elsewhere, attracted by the next trap, a portrait, a grave, the water of the fake suicide, or the tower of the impending crime. So the machine only leads to the trap. The eye only leads to illusion. And the town of San Francisco, where the urban traffic repeatedly vanishes in the silence of an empty hotel, a quiet museum, a solitary graveyard, or a desert shore, seems to be mourning not only for the fictitious Carlotta of the plot, but much more for the exuberant Odessa featured by Zika Vertov. I will draw from this a conclusion slightly different from Godard's one. Hollywood did not achieve the factory dreamed by communism. Rather, it recycled the elements of the mechanical communist dream and made them serve the old art of narration. But the very possibility of this recycling tells us something important. An art never is simply an art. It is always at the same time the proposition of a possible word, and its formal devices often are the remainder of utopias that were destined to much more than the pleasure of the spectators, namely the redistribution of the collective forms of sensory experience. My second comment will be about the presupposition underpinning the histories of cinema. Godard wants to free the images of cinema from their subjection to the industry of stories. But by so doing, he confuses, I think, two ideas of what an image is. On the one hand, the image for him is the icon into which the features of the sensuous world are engraved. On the other hand, the image is just a sign that can be combined with any other sign. If we refer to what I try to tell about Vertov, it would be possible to say that Godard wants both the power of the look that seizes the birth of all things and the power of the machine that dismisses the centrality of the look in order to connect everything with every other thing. He makes a film of Vertov with the images extracted from Hitchcock, Lang, Eisenstein, or Rossellini. But in so doing, I think, he erases the tension between the communication of movement and the centrality of the eye. The lesson that we could draw from Vertov's film is the troubling lesson that the eye apparently can make connection only if it stops lingering over what it sees, in a way if it stops looking. Godard discards this disjunction between seeing and moving in order to align the icon that suspends the stories